Western Philosophy,威尔杜兰著 Chapter 2, Section 8, Politics. First paragraph. Communism and conservatism. From so aristocratic an ethic there naturally follows, or was the sequence the other way, a severely aristocratic political philosophy. It was not to be expected that the tutor of an emperor and the husband of a princess would have any exaggerated attachment to the common people, or even to the mercantile bourgeoisie. Our philosophy is where our treasure lies. But further, Aristotle was honestly conservative because of the turmoil and disaster that had come out of Athenian democracy. Like a typical scholar, he longed for order, security, and peace. This, he felt, was no time for political extravagances. Radicalism is a luxury of stability. We may dare to change things only when things lie steady under our hands. And in general, says Aristotle, the habit of lightly changing the laws is an evil. And when the advantage of change is more, some defects, whether in the law or in the ruler, had better be met with philosophic toleration. The citizen will gain less by the change than he will lose by acquiring the habit of disobedience. The power of the law to secure observance and therefore to maintain political stability rests very largely on custom, and to pass lightly from old laws to new ones is a certain means of weakening the inmost essence of all law whatever. Let us not disregard the experience of ages. Surely, in the multitude of years, these things, if they were good, would not have remained unknown. These things, of course, means chiefly Plato's communistic republic. Aristotle fights the realism of Plato about universals and idealism of Plato about government. He finds many dark spots in the picture painted by the master. He does not relish the barrack-like continuity of contact to which Plato apparently condemned his Gaudian philosophers. Conservative though he is, Aristotle values individual quality, privacy, and liberty above social efficiency and power. He would not care to call every contemporary brother or sister nor every elder person, father or mother. If all are your brothers, none is, and how much better it is to be the real cousin of somebody than to be a son after Plato's fashion. In a state having women and children in common, love will be watery. Of the two qualities which chiefly inspire regard and affection, that a thing is your own and that it awakens real love in you, neither can exist in such a state as Plato's. Perhaps there was, in the dim past, a communistic society when the family was the only state, and the pasturage or simple tillage the only form of life. But in a more divided state of society, where the division of labor into unequally important functions elicits and enlarges the natural inequality of man, communism breaks down because it provides no adequate incentive for the exertion of superior abilities. The stimulus of gain is necessary to arduous work, and the stimulus of ownership is necessary to proper industry, husbandry, and care. When everybody owns everything, nobody will take care of anything. That which is common to the greatest number has the least attention bestowed upon it. Everyone thinks chiefly of his own, hardly ever of the public interest. And there is always a difficulty in living together or having things in common, but especially in having common property. The partnerships of fellow travelers, to say nothing of the arduous communism of marriage, are an example to the point, for they generally fall out by the way and quarrel about any trifle that turns up. Men readily listen to utopia and are easily induced to believe that in some wonderful manner everybody will become everybody's friend, especially when someone is heard denouncing the evils now existing, which are said to arise out of the possession of private property. These evils, however, arise from quite another source, the wickedness of human nature. Political science does not make men, but must take them as they come from nature. And human nature, the human average, is nearer to the beast than to the god. The great majority of men are natural dunce and sluggards. In any system whatever, these men will sink to the bottom, and to help them with state subsidies is like pouring water into a leaking cask. Such people must be ruled politics and directed in industry, with their consent, if possible, without it, if necessary. From the hour of their birth, some are marked out for subjection and others for command. For he who can foresee with his mind is by nature intended to be lord and master, and he who can work only with his body is by nature a slave. The slave is to the master what the body is to the mind, and as the body should be subject to the mind, so it is better for all inferiors that they should be under the rule of a master. The slave is a tool with life in it. The tool is a lifeless slave. And then our hard-hearted philosopher, with a glimmer of possibilities which the Industrial Revolution has opened to our hands, writes for a moment with wistful hope. If every instrument would accomplish its own work, obeying or anticipating the will of others, if the shuttle would weave or the plectron touch the lyre, without a hand to guide them, then chief workmen would not need assistants, nor masters slaves. This philosophy typifies the Greek disdain for manual labor. Such work in Athens had not become so complicated as it is today, when the intelligence demanded in many manual trades is at times much greater than that required for the operations of the lower middle class. And even a college professor may look upon an automobile mechanic in certain exigencies as a very good. Manual work was then merely manual, and Aristotle looked down upon it from the heights of philosophy as belonging to men without minds, as only fit for slaves, and only fitting men for slavery. Manual labor, he believes, dulls and deteriorates the mind, and leaves neither time nor energy for political intelligence. It seems to Aristotle a reasonable corollary that only persons of some leisure should have a voice in government. The best form of state will not admit mechanics to citizenship. At Thebes, there was a law that no man could hold office who had not retired from business 10 years before. Even merchant and financiers are classed by Aristotle among slaves. Retail trade is a natural and a mode by which men gain from one another. The most hated sort of such exchange is usury, which makes a gain out of money itself, and not from its natural use. For money was intended as an instrument of exchange and not as the mother of interest. This usury, tokos, which means the birth of money from money, is of all modes of gain the most unnatural. Money should not breed. Hence, the discussion of the theory of finance is not unworthy of philosophy, but to be engaged in finance or in money making is unworthy of a free man. Paragraph 2. Marriage and education. Woman is to man as the slave to the master, the manual to the mental worker, the barbarian to the Greek. Woman is an unfinished man, left standing on a lower step in the scale of development. The male is by nature superior and the female inferior. The one rules and the other is ruled, and this principle extends of necessity to all mankind. Woman is weak of will and therefore incapable of independence of character or position. Her best condition is a quiet home life in which, while ruled by the man in her external relations, she may be in domestic affairs supreme. Women should not be made more like men, as in Plato's Republic. Rather, the dissimilarity should be increased. Nothing is so attractive as the different. The courage of a man and that of a woman are not, as Socrates supposed, the same. The courage of a man is shown in commanding, that of a woman in obeying. As the poet says, silence is a woman's glory. Aristotle seems to suspect that this ideal enslavement of woman is a rare achievement for man, and that as often as not the scepter is with the tongue rather than with the arm, as if to give the male an indispensable advantage. He advises him to defer marriage till the vicinity of 37, and then to marry a lass of some 20 years. A girl who is rounding the 20s is usually the equal of a man of 30, but may perhaps be managed by a seasoned warrior of 37. What attracts Aristotle to this matrimonial mathematics is the consideration that two such desperate persons will lose their reproductive power and passions at approximately the same time. If the man is still able to beget children, while the woman is unable to bear them, or vice versa, quarrels and differences will arise. Since the time of generation is commonly limited within the age of 70 years in the man and 50 in the woman, the commencement of their union should conform to this period. The union of male and female when too young is bad for the creation of children. In all animals, the offspring of the young are small and ill-developed, and generally female. Health is more important than love. Further, it conduces to temperance not to marry too soon. For women who marry early are apt to be wanton, and in men too the bodily frame is stunted if they marry while they are growing. These matters should not be left to youthful caprice. They should be under state supervision and controlled. The state should determine the minimum and maximum ages of marriage for each sex, the best seasons for conception, and the rate of increase in population. If the natural rate of increase is too high, the cruel practice of infanticide may be replaced by abortion, and let abortion be procured before sense and life have begun. There is an ideal number of population for every state, varying with its position and resources. A state when composed of too few is not, as a state should be, self-sufficing, while if it has too many, it becomes a nation and not a state, and is almost incapable of constitutional government, or of ethnic or political unity. Anything in excess of a population of 10,000 is undesirable. Education, too, should be in the hands of the state. That which most contributes to the permanence of constitutions is the adaptation of education to the form of government. The citizen should be molded to the form of government under which he lives. By state control of schools, we might divert men from industry and trade to agricultural, and we might train men, while keeping property private, to open their possession to discriminately common use. Among good men, with respect to the use of property, the proverb will hold that friends should have all things in common. But above all, the growing citizen must be taught obedience to law, else a state is impossible. It has been well said that he who has never learned to obey cannot be a good commander. The good citizen should be capable of both, and Only a state system of schools can achieve social unity amid ethnic heterogeneity. The state is a plurality which must be made into a unity and a community by an appreciated security which comes of social organization. The freedom that comes of law, meant when perfected, is the best of animals, but when isolated he is the worst of all. For injustice is more dangerous when armed, and man is equipped at birth with the weapon of intelligence, and with qualities of character which he may use for the vilest ends. Wherefore, if he have not virtue, he is the most unholy and savage of animals, full of gluttony and lust, and only social control can give him virtue. Through speech, man evolved society, through society intelligence, through intelligence order, and through order civilization. In such an ordered state, the individual has 1,000 opportunities and avenues of development open to him which a solitary life would never give. To live alone, then one must be either an animal or a god. Hence revolution is almost always unwise. It may achieve some good, but at the cost of many evils, the chief of which is the disturbance and perhaps the dissolution of that social order and structure on which every political good depends. The direct consequences of revolutionary innovations may be calculable and salutary, but the direct are generally incalculable and not seldom disastrous. They who take only a few points into account find it easy to pronounce judgment, and a man can make up his mind quickly if he has only a little to make up. Young men are easily deceived, for they are quick to hope. The suppression of long-established habits brings the overthrow of innovating governments, because the old habits persist among the people's character are not so easily changed as laws. If a constitution is to be permanent, all the parts of society must desire it to be maintained. Therefore, a ruler who would avoid a revolution should prevent extremes of poverty and wealth, a condition which is most often the result of war. He should, like the English, encourage colonization as an outlet for a dangerously congested population, and he should foster and practice religion. An autocratic ruler particularly should appear to be earnest in the worship of the gods. For if men think that a ruler is religious and reveres the gods, they are less afraid of suffering injustice at his hands, and are less disposed to conspire against him, since they believe that the gods themselves are fighting on his side. The third paragraph, democracy and aristocracy. With such safeguards in religion, in education, and in the ordering of family life, almost any of the traditional forms of government will serve. All forms have good and bad commingled in them, and are severally adapted to various conditions. Theoretically, the ideal form of government would be the centralization of all political power in the one best man. Homer is right. Bad is the lordship of many. Let one be your ruler and master. For such a man, law would be rather an instrument than a limit. For men of eminent ability there is no law, they are themselves a law. Anyone would be ridiculous who should attempt to make laws for them. They would probably resort what in the fable of Antisthenes the lion said to the hare, when in the council of beasts the latter began haranguing and claiming equality for all. Where are your clothes? But in practice, monarchy is usually the worst form of government, for great strength and great virtue are not near allied. Hence, the best practicable polity is aristocracy, the rule of the informed and capable few. Government is too complex a thing to have its issues decided by number. When lesser issues are reserved for knowledge and ability, as the physician ought to be judged by the physician, so ought men in general to be judged by their peers. Now, does not this same principle apply to elections? For a right election can only be made by those who have knowledge. A geometrician, example, will choose rightly in matters of geometry, or a pilot in matters of navigation, so that neither the election of magistrates nor the calling of them to account should be entrusted to the many. The difficulty with hereditary aristocracy is that it has no permanent economic base. The eternal recurrence of the nouveau riche puts political office sooner or later at the disposal of the highest bidder. It is surely a bad thing that the greatest offices should be bought. The law which permits this abuse makes wealth of more account than ability, and the whole state becomes avaricious. For whenever the chiefs of the state deem anything honorable, the other citizens are sure to follow their example. The prestige imitation of modern social psychology. And where ability is not the first place, there is no real aristocracy. Democracy is usually the result of a revolution against plutocracy. Love of gain in the ruling classes tends constantly to diminish their number, marks elimination of the middle class, and so to strengthen the masses who in the end set upon their masters and establish democracies. This rule by the poor has some advantages. The people, though individually they may be worse judges than those who have special knowledge, are collectively as good. Moreover, there are some artists whose works are best judged not by themselves alone, but by those who do not possess the art. Example, the user or master of a house will be a better judge of it than the builder, and the guest will be better judge of a feast than the cook. And the many are more incorruptible than the few. They are like the greater quantity of water, which is less easily spoiled than a little. The individual is liable to be overcome by anger or by some other passion, and then his judgment is necessarily perverted. But it is hardly to be supposed that a great number of persons would all get into a passion and go wrong at the same moment. Yet democracy is on the whole inferior to aristocracy, for it is based on a false assumption of equality. It arises out of the notion that those who are equal in one respect, example, in respect of the law, are equal in all respects. Because men are equally free, they claim to be absolutely equal. The upshot is that ability is sacrificed to number, while numbers are manipulated by trickery because the people are so easily misled and so fickle in their views. The ballot should be limited to the intelligent. What we need is a combination of aristocracy and democracy. Constitutional government offers this happy union. It is not the best conceivable government that would be an aristocracy of education, but it is the best possible state. We must ask, what is the best constitution for most states and the best life for most men? Neither assuming a standard of excellence which will be above ordinary persons, nor an education exceptionally favored by nature or circumstance, nor yet an ideal state which will be only an aspiration, but having in mind such a life as the majority will be able to share, and the form of government to which states in general can attain. It is necessary to begin by assuming a principle of general application, namely that part of the state which desires the continuance of the government must be stronger than that which does not. And strength consists neither in number alone, nor in property alone, nor in military or political ability alone, but in a combination of these. So that regard has to be taken of freedom, wealth, culture, and noble birth, as well as of mere numerical superiority. Now, where shall we find such an economic majority to support our constitutional government? Perhaps best in the middle class. Here again, we have the golden mean, just as constitutional government itself would be a mean between democracy and aristocracy. Our state will